My next guest is Attleboro Mayor Paul Heroux. He wants to be the next Bristol County Sheriff, replace the tough-talking Tom Hodgson. Welcome in.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Hodgson frames that really as a law enforcement position. He gets the bad guys at the end, wears the uniform, talks tough. What's your law enforcement background to take over that position?
Well, it's really not a law enforcement job. It's a corrections job. Law enforcement's about criminal investigation, traffic stops, arrests. The sheriff has the legal authority to do those things, but really in Massachusetts, what the sheriff should be doing is running a county jail. Leave law enforcement to the local, state, and federal police. So I disagree with his approach to the job in a lot of different ways. But I used to work in the Philadelphia jail system. I was assistant to the commissioner. I also worked in the Mass Department of Correction. I'm the only candidate in the race with any corrections background. I've got a master's in criminology. I'm the mayor of city of Attleboro right now, overseeing a police department. I've been published over 100 times on crime policy issues. I was a state representative on the Public Safety Committee, so I'm qualified.
Your experience within the correctional system certainly makes you part of law enforcement, though, doesn't it?
Well, it's...
You're not running away from that.
Well, no, it's not that I'm running away from it, but law enforcement, if you're enforcing the law, you're out, doing traffic stops, you're out doing arrests, you're doing investigations.
Okay.
Corrections is at the tail end of the criminal justice spectrum. So, I would say that it's, we're not really doing law enforcement while we're doing corrections about care, custody, control, and rehabilitation. Are we doing traffic stops? That's law enforcement. Are we doing arrests? That's law enforcement. Those are the things I would like to get away from. Leave that stuff to the local police. So it's all part of the criminal justice continuum, but it's at the end after the law enforcement has gone on, after the judging has gone on in the courts, and now we're doing care, custody, control, and rehabilitation.
So it almost sounds as if you think the sheriff, the title of sheriff, is a misnomer. We call it the director of the ACI in Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly. So a sheriff does different things in different parts of the country. I've lived in California, I've lived in Pennsylvania, and in some other places like California, Texas, the sheriff will have more of a law enforcement role.
Right.
In Massachusetts, that's not necessary. We have local police, we have state police, we have federal police, but that's not always the case in other places. So in Massachusetts, it's basically a different role. However, as a politician, a politician can get involved with anything, and a sheriff is a politician. They can go ahead and, a politician can pursue any policy area. And in Massachusetts, the law allows a sheriff to do certain law enforcement activities, but then you're duplicating efforts with the local police or sometimes the state police, and I think that's probably a bad idea. And additionally, lastly, if you're getting involved with law enforcement and corrections, you're spreading yourself pretty thin, and so really, law enforcement and everything that's involved with that, I oversee a police department. That is an entire profession, and I used to work in jail and I worked in prison. That's a completely different profession. They are two completely different jobs. Care, custody, control, totally different.
I understand. Would you wear the uniform, or would you come to work like this?
Probably come to work like this, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you have a fundamental difference with the way Sheriff Hodgson is running the system than the way you would run it. And you know something? They've put him in time again, and they like this kind of tough law and order punishment person. He gets very tough with them. That seems to be what the voters like.
Well, he hasn't had an opponent in 12 years. And
that says that can only speak well of him.
Well, that also, I don't know about that. There's, that's
the voters have put you in more than once, and they put him in a lot. It speaks well of him.
Well, he hasn't had an opponent, and he won his last re-election with 51%. Again, and so he was, Bristol County is probably the most conservative county in the state, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And, he barely scraped by with 51%. Now, a win is a win, and, but the fact that nobody steps up and ran against him in 2016 doesn't mean that he was doing a good job. It just means nobody ran against him. I think Republicans would argue that in 2016, when I also ran unopposed, it didn't mean that the Republican Party or my detractors thought I was doing a good job. It just means that nobody ran against me.
But it also meant the voters wanted you. clearly, the voters wanted you. The voters wanted him time and time again. Now, I know you say last time around a little closer than it's been for him before, but they appear to like this tough-talking law man.
Well,
very tough on illegal immigrants, very tough on the people he has. We've seen the stories.
Well, talking like a tough guy doesn't mean you're actually reducing crime. Okay,
Okay.
I'm a criminologist. I worked in jail, I worked in prison, and his approaches to corrections are not supported by any of the research, any of the evaluations of other practices that's going on. So he talks like a tough guy, he acts like a tough guy. But if we're trying to run a rehabilitative environment where we have people who are in there for drug addiction, who are in there for anger management issues, and we're acting like a tough guy on these guys, and we're making life miserable for them, how effective is that drug treatment or that mental health treatment going to actually be if the people who are supposed to be getting treatment, and it's arguably that not a lot of them are getting it, if they're constantly under attack by the system that is supposed to be involved with their care, custody, control, and rehabilitation. Okay. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm going to hold these people accountable and nobody's going to be tougher on crime, right, and then I'm going to go ahead and reduce recidivism. It doesn't work like that, because what you're doing is you're modeling for people what the behavior is they should be exhibiting, and he doesn't show any humanity, doesn't show any compassion. And I'm not saying we should show compassion to the inmates themselves. I'm talking about the actual victims. If he was serious about actually taking care of the victims, he would really focus on reducing recidivism, and he's not. He actually has no idea if the programs or the interventions he's using reduces recidivism or not. He doesn't measure it.
All right. I think the last thing that you want to say is you'll be softer on these inmates than he was. I know you're not saying that, right?
No, I'm becoming smarter.
In listening to you, some people may say, you're talking about, well, he doesn't care about the victims. What is it his business to care about the victims? He deals with the bad guys. It's another part of society to deal with the victim of the bad guy. Isn't that a bit of a stretch? And just take the last 30 seconds.
You are an elected official as the sheriff. You have to be worried about the victims because they are your constituency. And we have to release people back into society better than they arrived. And making life miserable for them, not addressing their mental health needs or their drug addiction needs, actually makes them worse off. And it models for them the behavior they should be treating other people with. So his approach to corrections is not supported by the ways that the best practices. He's a politician. He's delivered this sort of this show. He's a show horse. He's delivered this show that nobody's tougher on crime. I'm going to be smarter on crime. I'm going to address the risks and needs of inmates, focus on discharge planning, set people up for success after they're released, and not just say, if you don't like it here, don't come back. That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for more recidivism, reoffending.
Attleboro Mayor Paul Heroux, you want to be the sheriff. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, Gene.